Maneco 64 here, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So it's Sunday, January 13th, 2019, and I've decided to do a live stream. I didn't, I'll probably have to wait a little bit. There's no one on yet. Just spur of the moment. So it's around 4:30 p.m. London time. Healthy, wealthy, and stealthy. Hi there. Nice to see you here. Yes, I played a little bit of golf this afternoon on my own because I had to do something else in the morning. So I played about 13 holes. It's still quite cold, but it was mild today and fairly windy, but just got some exercise. And yeah, I decided to do this a live stream about our monetary system because I think everything else is a distraction. And I highly, I watched this morning a, hello, Dennis, is there something important today? I will always watch you. Today, I watched a video on Greg Hunter's USA Watchdog. I think everyone needs to watch that video. He interviews Catherine Austin Fitts from Solari Report. And Catherine Austin Fitts is very knowledgeable. She used to be in the belly of the beast in Washington, D.C., on Wall Street. She was in the Bush senior administration. She was worked at HUD. She worked for Dillon Reed, which became part of UBS eventually, investment bank. And James Dillon, I think he was Secretary of the Treasury under Bush Senior. So she worked with these people. And they're talking again about the missing $21 trillion. And it's not only 21 trillion, but she says it's more like 50 trillion. And it's very interesting because of what's happening in France. Donald Trump, President of the United States, is hiding something from us. This controversy is done. Well, I highly recommend the interview of Greg Hunter and Catherine Austin Fitts, mainly because she talks about how it's almost impossible unless a president has loads of support in both houses of Congress. It's impossible to fight. She calls it fascism. She says now even the U.S. government, the House and the Senate and the banking system, they've hijacked the American government. They basically have accounting rules that allows the Congress and the banks and the big corporations to hide, to spend, to basically steal the money of the American people. And I've said in the past about this 21 trillion, and it was interesting that she mentioned it today, that the one way to find out where this money is going is to audit the Fed secret space program. I don't think it's a secret space program. I think, as I said, if you audit the Federal Reserve, because all the money that leaves the United States goes through the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, especially monies that go through the U.S. Treasury, because the Federal Reserve is the fiscal agent for the U.S. government. And it would be very easy to find out where all these trillions are going. And this, how can I say, she even mentioned as well the Spider's Web documentary, which I've spoken about in the last few months. And I've made videos about it. And when I finish this live stream, I will put some links below in the description when this is recorded. Right now, I'm in my living room, and I'm just talking to the phone. I don't have anything, my laptop with me or anything. So I'm doing it off my head. But the Spider's Web documentary just shows how the City of London is basically sovereign, and all the, the Bank of England and the City of London, they do business, any kind of business. And it's doesn't mean it's done in the UK. but it's done offshore, all the offshore tax havens. So that's where the money is going, the trillions and trillions that are leaving the United States. They're being funneled through offshore, through the city of London into the offshore tax havens like Bermuda, Turks and Caicos, and many others. And even in Europe, they do the same thing. Luxembourg is a tax haven. The French have their own offshore tax havens. So, let's see here. We got 54 people. Yeah, and she doesn't seem too optimistic, Catherine Austin Fitts. She says the only way to change this is to get people elected that will change this. Because she says, Trump on his own cannot do it. This is too powerful. But she says as well that Trump has done a lot of things that he promised, like he is combating the globalists, but she says it's too hard. I personally, I'm not calling for revolt or violence, but I'm not sure fighting these people is going to be very hard. One of the ways that I recommend people fight the bankers and this monetary system is trying to get out of the system. And by that, I don't mean to get out, anarchism is a better solution. By this, I don't mean to get out completely, of course, because you still need to function within society. You still need the money in the bank to function, unfortunately. But to try to get out as much as possible. And that also means not buying, can I just recommend, if you want me to see your questions, you might want to do a super chat. I'm not trying to get money or anything. It's just that I've got my phone here, my iPhone, and it goes very quickly. Vatican, I'm not sure if the Vatican is the head of the snake. A lot of people say that. I think it's the bankers. They control the money supply. They control the issuance of money. The Vatican doesn't issue. The Vatican is a small... I don't think it's that important. It is important, but I think the most important, the head of the snake really is the central banking system. I would say, hi David, I would say that the BIS in Basel, that's the bank for the central banks. You get rid of the BIS, that's a great step towards getting rid of the power of the central banks, because I think this system is like Cerberus, the three-headed dog, and the central banks and the BIS, that's one head. The political establishment is the other head, and the other establishment, I would say, is the legal system, and the offshore tax havens. You need to strike at that. So why the BIS? Well, because the BIS operates as a sovereign entity. It's above the law. No one can go in their headquarters in Basel. No one, the local police in Switzerland is not allowed to go there. And when the central bankers travel there, 6 times a year or once every 2 months, they travel under diplomatic passports. They can take documents. They can't be stopped. They can't be investigated. So that's how they do their dirty work, through the BIS. The other video I recommend as well is All the Plenaries Men. And again, I'll put the link to this below later on when I record this. All the Plenaries Men just shows how these too big to fail banks are able to operate criminally and not be prosecuted. And the BIS is basically, defends them. So like the Department of Justice, the Department of Justice in the US and the UK, they've got no, they can't basically jail the bankers. They can't prosecute them. I don't think there's been a prosecution of a banker in the UK, of a major banker, since the late 80s, early 90s. So that's how it works. Yeah, BIS. That's one of the heads that we need to get rid of. So what about what's happening in France? I mean, I remember there were some riots in the UK around 2011, but it lasted a couple of weekends and then it went. But this has been going on for 2 months, on 2 months now, the yellow vests. And I've made a video yesterday about how they're starting to look at the banking system, this fraudulent fiat money system that allows governments and banks to basically steal our wealth. And how do they do that? Well, because they can create credit out of thin air. And with that credit, they can buy assets while we have to work very hard to earn that credit or money to buy assets. And that's how they do it. Can you imagine if you could, or if I could here where I live, issue money, credit, and make people take it and then go and like buy loads of stuff? People wouldn't be very happy, but that's the system we have here now. So I see quite a few people on keep tins of food. So I'm going to look at some of these comments here. I'm sorry I haven't been able to see them because they go through quite quickly. Jazz Atwell, hi Jazz. S. Walker, moderator, thank you, says keep tins of food. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Get rid of possessions and focus on personal liquidity. Yeah, I agree with that, Reggie Davis. I mean, we do need some possessions, but I think the mindset of the very materialistic mindset plays right into the banker's hands. They want you to borrow the money. They want you to get into debt, right? It's DAX HR 24 calls for a full audit of the Board of Governors Federal Reserve System. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of HRs, like proposals calling for that. The thing is to get it passed through Congress to actually do the audits. I think they'll find a lot of theft going through the Federal Reserve. But I would say also, the mainstream media, the propaganda media, they are part of the problem as well. And they are together, with the Wall Street bankers, the central banks. I remember, I'll tell you a story when I used to work in the city back in somewhere around 2004, 5, 6, that period of time. I used to follow gold a lot. I used to get calls from Bloomberg from a reporter in London asking about the gold market. And this person was very nice. And I used to tell this person, look, have you noticed that every time COMEX opened, the gold price dumps? There's a lot of manipulation that central bankers are involved. And eventually I went out, this person, for a coffee to talk about it. And this person said, we're not really supposed to talk about these things. And it was a nice person as well. I'm not saying if it was a he or a she. I don't want to really go there. But all I'm trying to say is even the mainstream media, they won't touch the subject of gold manipulation. And why is gold manipulation so important? Well, because this system, this fiat money system, doesn't work if gold is too, if everyone wants to have gold, if the gold price is too high, it won't work. And that's why the manipulation is not only the price, but also the brainwashing, the fake news about gold. You've probably seen, me talk about the editorial from the FT that came out in 2004, saying that gold was useless and that it was going nowhere and it was, finished. And at the time, gold was $400, right? So that's the manipulation. It's not only the price, but the mindset. No one ever talks about it in the mainstream media. When you listen to the radio in the UK, they say, oh, we're going to report what the markets are doing. They just say, oh, the pound is doing this and the FTSE is doing that, right? So that's all they do. So The other thing I like to say, they talk about the wall as well. In this Greg Hunter interview with Catherine Austin Fitts. And Catherine Austin Fitts says there's plenty of money to build the wall. And the key question with the wall is who's going to control the wall in Texas? You see, she says Schumer controls the New York banks. They want to control the flow of money through there. Pelosi controls the California banks. And apparently she says Trump has made a deal with the Bushes, and they want to control the flow of money through Texas with the Texas banks. So that's what it's all about. It's about control. MM here. I see Dax is here. Nice to see everyone coming up. Thanks, MM for the encouragement. Yeah, I just want to reiterate, I'm not on my desktop. I'm doing this on my iPhone. So a lot of times, I can't keep up with all the questions. I will just talk about what I think is important today. If I do see some questions and I'm able to read them, I will try to answer them. Dollar will become worthless. Yeah, and so I'm thinking, because some of you might know, about a few months ago, I started subscribing to The Economist. I don't think I'm going to keep that subscription for more than a year. And because I really think that magazine is pure disinformation. I thought maybe that it could help knowing what the globalists are thinking, but I think it's a waste, actually. So I'm going to let it run out after a year. And the thing I want to subscribe to now, I think if you can, an interesting report is the Solari report. She knows what she's talking about, Catherine Austin Fitts. And it's a bit discouraging listening to this latest interview. She says, things are already really bad. She says it's not going to get better. And everything, not just in the United States, but it's probably happening here in the UK as well. We're being robbed by the deep state, by Wall Street, by the politicians, and it's all being done, it's all being put offshore, and that's why it's important to audit the Federal Reserve. And she talks about FASB 52. That's the latest accounting rule, which allows now the U.S. government with Wall Street and the big corporations basically to do whatever they want. She gives the analogy of, like, if you go to a church and then the pastor starts talking, they have a $500,000 budget a year, this church, for example, and she says, and then the pastor says, oh, we've got about $5 million that undocumented, we don't know where that money is. People would be really upset, and that's what's happening. I don't think it's just the United States. I don't have proof of that happening here in the UK, but I'm sure that a government here is operating the same way. Trends Journal is interesting as well, yeah. Someone's asking about Iraqi dinars. I don't have any view on that. I think that's total misinformation. Why would you want to have Iraqi dinars? I think it's complete rubbish. Don't get involved in Iraqi dinars. Capital controls in France. Is that a headline? That could, that's the other thing Catherine Austin Fitts says, because a lot of my advice, of course, what I do, well, it's not my advice, it's what I do. And if you decide that it's a good idea and you've done your homework, you might want to do it. Take as much of your savings or investments out of the system, put it into physical precious metals. But even there, she says that the U.S. Treasury has the power to confiscate all your assets. So nothing is safe, not even in the UK. So it's really tough. I think, yeah, I think what is happening in France is actually, I don't think it's, how can I say, a manufactured crisis. I think it's actually organic, to be honest. And I think the French establishment is worried, not only in France, but everywhere else in the world. I think some people are waking up in France. In yesterday's video that I made, it's got quite a lot of views. I showed like people protesting outside the Rothschild Bank in Paris, and they had all these signs, if people knew about our monetary system, there'd be a revolution next day, the Henry Ford quote. They had quotes from Thomas Jefferson saying that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying everyone who's doing this protest knows this, but it's encouraging that people are starting to look. I've always said the last 3 years in this channel, even though, of course, I do cover geopolitics, some of the events that's going on, but my mission is to wake people up to this fraudulent monetary system, because you just got to follow the money. You take control of the money from these people, they won't have as much power. And the fiat money system allows them to do that. Hi, Lord Humongous. Thank you. Nice to see you. Yellow vests read QAnon. Well, I think personally, for so many years, people have been saying in the States, oh, you need to make sure you elect the right people to change, things. But I don't think that's going to ever work. I think the U.S. Congress is too compromised. It's too corrupt to change. What am I espousing anything? No, but I don't think it will change until people wake up in the U.S., maybe like in France. I think people are more awake now in France than in the U.S. Not saying that there aren't people awake in the U.S., but anyway. Yeah, I think Q is a big distraction as well. Yeah, I think the most important thing is to focus on the Federal Reserve, audit the Federal Reserve, abolish the Federal, not only audit the Federal Reserve, but abolish it thereafter. That's the whole focus. We got to go, that the head of the snake is the money system, the central banking system. We got to cut their heads. And yeah, that's the only way to do it. It's easier said than done, of course, but maybe people need to start protesting. I remember Occupy Wall Street, that didn't last that long. And there were people with signs and the Fed during those protests, but it just fizzled out. I don't know what happened. But the yellow vests, they've been going on for almost 2 months now. And I think they're going to keep going. Yeah, I agree, Seth. I've got a few, connections in terms of local coin shops. It's hard to find them, but if you look hard enough, you will find them. Yeah, I think, I'm not sure about this Q and all this stuff about JFK Jr. It's just a huge distraction, especially when you listen to Catherine's Austin Fitts interview with Greg Hunter and how things are actually getting worse. They're going to steal even more now. And she's not blaming Trump or anything because she said Trump on his own can't fight these people. She actually says she thinks he's trying his best. But unless he had a Congress that was 100% behind him, unless he has that, he won't be able to do anything. The deep state is still in control. And the deep state includes Wall Street, the big corporations. The other thing I wanted to talk about today is regulations, because I've watched a few interesting documentaries. Maybe you guys seen Humboldt, or Murder Mountain, it's called, on Netflix. It's about the Humboldt County in Northern California and how they've legalized cannabis. But what it's led to is loads of regulations on the growers of cannabis, and it's going to drive all the small mom and pop businesses out of business. And the big corporations are going to be the only ones who are going to be able to survive and flourish. So regulation, in my opinion, is just another tool of the globalists to destroy small businesses. And small businesses, we know, create a lot of jobs. They're the ones who create the most jobs. Big corporations don't. What else? There's another thing I watched about regulation but it will come to me. But that's what I'm trying to say. I think the market is the best regulator in the end of the day. If you run a business and your products are no good and they're dangerous, people are not going to keep buying your products. That's the best way to regulate through the market. I think what we have now only serves the interest of the big corporations because they can afford to pay for all the regulatory burden, while small business can't. I found out the hard way, when I opened my business in 2012, my pawnbroking shop in the UK. The business itself, the underlying business, was really, really good. If I didn't have all the taxes and regulations, I would have probably still be in that business. But I broke even after 18 months, but it was just not worth it. I was doing all the work. I couldn't employ anyone. And I was paying £8,000, almost £9,000, just in local taxes. For what? It's crazy. Evening, Oliver. Stevens, have you heard about 788, 780 Finchley Road being a front for the UK elite to launder money out of the country? Oh, I've heard of Gordon Bowden's. Yeah, I have heard of that. But I think I heard of that years ago, but I haven't looked into it. But good afternoon, Mario. Hi, Chris. I'm doing well, thanks. And you? But I think the UK, is doing what the US is doing. I haven't really looked into it, but I suspect also, that a lot of the public money, UK, is being stolen as well through private companies, and it's all going offshore. The other thing as well, hedge funds. Where do you think they get all their money? Because all these hedge funds are offshore. They are based physically in New York and London, but they only operate as agents to the, hedge funds that are, how can I say, legally set up in the Turks and Caicos, Cayman Islands, Bermuda, and all these offshore centers. They operate out of London, New York as agents for them, but where are all the billions and trillions that they manage to come from? Well, I think it's coming from this deep state theft that Catherine Austin Fitts talks about. She even talks about how they're also privatizing for, private mercenaries. And she said this is really bad. She says America's become a fascist state. And and it's the same thing here in the UK, even though I haven't seen any studies about how much is missing from the UK, but I would venture to say that there's probably a lot of money being siphoned offshore. And how can we stop this? Well, it would be very easy. You just crack down on these offshore tax havens, but they're protected. Here in the UK, and the Americans play along. I recommend the Spider's Web video, which I've recommended before. The city, talks about the City of London, how they operate in the City of London, but everything is done for offshore accounts, and it's all this this money is just crazy. And it's and a lot of this, a lot of the money is going also for wars, unnecessary wars, trillions of dollars. If all this money could be spent more wisely, but in the end of the day, I think the most important thing is, I think Sam, I think the French, the Gilets jaunes is for real. And you guys might like this. I was watching yesterday a video. It was in French. It was a French historian. I think her name, I forgot her name, but she's like an alternative history person. And not alternative, but she looks deeply into the history. And this interview with her was from 2014. And she actually said, at that time, and she focuses on the period from 1750 to the French Revolution. And she says the French Revolution was not the public was a public uprising. She actually says it was an elite takeover of the old regime in France. So it had nothing to do with public, with the public being unhappy with the monarchy or anything. So she said it was a manufactured, revolution. But she feels now, and this was in 2014, she thinks that now things are starting to get more, how can I say, it's coming from the grassroots. And she was talking about that 5 years ago, and now we get the yellow vest. So I think it could be very interesting. I think the same people that fomented the French Revolution, they fomented the revolution, the revolution in the UK, in England in 1648. They fomented the Bolshevik Revolution. They're behind all this. They're the globalists. That's who they are. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, Max Tyler thinks she will be president, has backed the French movement. You see, this left and right is another distraction. I think the French movement is not even left nor right. It's just people. And from what I've seen, this Cortez woman, she's a complete loony left. And I don't think that's the solution. We'll jump from one frying pan to another. We need to get rid of the division. People need, unfortunately, and it's hard. We need less money, less inflation, and we need more honest government, and I think it will translate into more honest everything. I'm not saying it's going to be utopia. She will help awaken people. I'm not sure about that. I know the elite, the central banking, the system we have now, they've stolen a lot of money from the public, not only in the last 10 years before, but since, over a century with all the wars and everything. We have, the public has been ripped off. But the answer is to end this system. It's not to keep the system and like use the system to benefit us. No, because it's a corrupt and immoral system. We need to get rid of the system first and then fix things. So that's why I don't think a change to the left or right will work. We need to like cut the head of the system, of the snake, so to speak. Yeah, they divide us. That's right, Gary. Still, John Robinson. When the system comes down, it will be when the Fed is ready for it to do so, and it will be controlled. It's possible, and what Catherine Austin Fitts says in her interview with Greg Hunter is that they control, all the assets, and they will pump and dump, and that's why I say it's imperative that you don't play this game. Stay out of the system. Invest in yourself. Invest in your family. Keep precious metals. Pay off your debts. By borrowing, spending too much, keeping your money in their banks, you just finance them. Of course, you need to keep a minimum amount in the bank because you need to function, but don't keep more than you have to. Tim Jones, how long will it take? Well, it's already been happening for the last 100 years. They have been stealing from us for the last 100 years with central banking, with wars, not only stealing, but, killing, getting us to fight in these wars and die for profit and for control. I mean, and why do I say that? Well, you just have to read the Tower of Basel, which is about the BIS, the book, the Tower of Basel, and it shows how during World War II, the German central bankers were working with the French central bankers, with the British central bankers, with the US bankers, the Japanese bankers. All the warring factions were doing business in Basel through the BIS, helping finance this war. It's just a game. It's just a game, and we're like pawns. So we really need to end this banking. Yeah, the Rothschild central banking, model has to be finished. We can't allow private banks to issue credit out of nothing. It needs, banking has to go back to being an honest business. If banks cannot lend what they don't have, it's like, if you go buy a car, if you pay for that car, you get the car. A car salesman doesn't say, "Oh no, you have to pay the car. You're not going to get the car now. You only get it in 10 years." What the hell is that? And that's what we have in banking. So what are you? That's a question. Not sure what you mean by that. Yeah, Reggie, do not use credit at all. Thoughts on Kim Jim? Who's Kim Jim? Do you mean Kim Jong-un? I don't have any. I think it's another big distraction. As I said, we need to focus on the money. Follow the money, as Catherine Austin Fitts said. Oh, he's the head of the BIS. Well, he's not really running the BIS. He's just an administrator. The BIS really is run by the the heads of the U.S. Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, and the ECB. Those are the people in charge, really. Tim Jones, like I said, things are already, they're just going to get worse. So, but it's before it gets better, it's going to get worse. I don't know when it's all going to trigger. It's very difficult to get, to predict. But as I've said before, the system has been inflated so much. The fiat money system is debt-based system, and it can only keep going if more and more people take on debt. And as you can see, I think people are up to here with that. They can, France is a great example. So I think we're near it, but it's difficult to say it's going to happen, next week or next month or in a year or 2 years. We just need to keep our heads down individually and do the best we can and be aware that things are not great. Reggie says has years worth of food. That's good. Yeah, Lord Humongous. I agree with you. The U.S. government is too big. They should shut it down completely. It should be minimal, right? Philosopher Bees, why you're voting again on Brexit? I haven't heard about that there's going to be another Brexit vote. I think it's going to be very important this week what's going to, nothing's clear yet about Brexit, but we voted already. We're going to leave, the UK is going to leave the EU on March 29th. But how are we going to leave? That's the question. I don't think there's going to be another vote. And if there is, there's going to be a lot of people upset. What will come next? A great GCR. Do you mean the great currency reset, I guess? Well, I think it's like Catherine Austin Fitts said, and I've said it before, it's been happening, the currencies are being reset. They're becoming worth less and less. Look at 1971, an ounce of gold was $35. Now it's $1,300 almost. So it's just continuous. What we might have is a reset that's like in a short period of time, but it's going to continue. It's going to get worse. And you need to be able to protect yourself from that, because these people are really powerful and they're going to try to screw the general public. Yeah, of course it's not going back to, well, if everything imploded, if the Dow went back to 35, which is unlikely, yeah, I mean, gold will always have purchasing power. That's the most important thing. Tim, I don't know what the system's going to be. It's going to depend on the people. It could be. People need to get educated, I think, and that's why I do my videos. If people, because even Alan Greenspan said, he wrote this essay in 1966 entitled "Golden Economic Freedom," and Ron Paul used to question Alan Greenspan a lot in Congress in the testimonies. And once he took that essay to Alan Greenspan and asked him to autograph it, and he asked Greenspan, "Do you still believe in everything you wrote about in 1966? That in order to have freedom and liberty and limited government, you need a gold standard." And Alan Greenspan said, "Yes, I believe still in 100% in all that." And he said, "But unfortunately, politically, people don't want that, because what it means having a sound money and precious metals as our as our monetary system, it means discipline. It means, most people love inflation. They like politicians spending money. You know, so people's paradigm and mindset need to change, and that's what's going to determine what we get next. Who knows? But what I try to do in my videos is try to get people to be their own central banks and be on their own silver or gold standard. Because we know that historically that has protected people's purchasing power. Tib, as I said, I don't know where gold will be priced at. It could be, the important thing about gold and silver is that they maintain their purchasing power. They could go to $1 million, for example, but it won't, it won't be worth like $1 million today. You might be able to buy, a coffee with $1 million, like in Zimbabwe. Licks 59. Our U.S. central bank will be the last to fall. Other smaller countries will precede it. It won't be another decade unless World War III breaks out. Well, there you go. You've got it sussed out. So you've got the timing. I'm not clever enough to know, if it's going to take a decade or 5 years or a year. I just know it's going to happen sometime. Douglas, can I trust pawn shops to buy gold, silver? Well, you have to do your homework, shop around. Usually they're okay. But I would rather buy gold from a coin dealer, not from a pawn shop. What business survive inflation? Commodity businesses. Usually commodity prices go up. Oil businesses. What else? Precious metals. Inflation usually doesn't, in general though, doesn't help businesses because when the price levels are changing so much, it's very difficult to plan in advance. So it's generally not great for business at all, inflation. Sam Saunders, the Romans invented Christianity as a means of mind control. I'm not sure about that. I actually think some people argue that Christianity was a grassroots movement, and that it was actually hijacked by the Roman Catholic Church. Who knows? It could have been the Romans, but the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church have their origins in Rome, I guess, but maybe they hijacked it because it was some people think it was a grassroots movement. I don't know. Sam Samuel says it was a Jewish movement. Well, Jesus was a Jew, wasn't he? So, but a lot of the Jews rejected him. Anyway, I'll take a few more questions and then I'll end the live stream. Hagia Sophia is coming back soon. Morrissey Smith, we are not alone. What was the copper to silver ratio when we had a metal standard in the U.S.? Sorry, Philosophies, I couldn't tell you that. I don't know. I'm sorry about that one. But I know the gold-silver ratio was around 15. You're welcome, Tim. Raymond Edwards, I live in the UK. I have just over 100,000 pounds in the bank and want to put it into land or property or gold. What would you advise? Well, yeah, I wouldn't. First of all, I wouldn't keep that much in the bank because you're over the 85,000 limit that they guarantee. Yeah, I would definitely buy physical gold. I recommend sovereigns for the UK. You can use. I'm gonna put a link below this live stream when I publish it as a video. You can go to goldinvestments.co.uk and use a maneco 64 promo code, and you get a 0.5% discount. They're the oldest bullion dealer in the city of London. Yeah, so I recommend physical gold, sovereigns. Land is good, but you need to, you know, I don't have any, land, but you need to check, I guess, the legal status, the taxation behind it. I think in the UK you can buy like, there's a tax, how can I say, an easy way to invest in land if you invest in like forests. There is that kind of investment in the UK. But yeah, I think keeping 100,000 in the bank is too much. And it's up to you to decide how much you want to invest in precious metals, land, or property. The thing with property as well, I think over the long term, property is a good way to maintain, your wealth. You look back in 1968, the average UK house price was £4,000. Now it's 215,000. So the only difficulty with housing is buying at the right time. But if you're going to hold it for the long haul, I don't think you should worry about the price, especially if you're not going to take on too much debt or a big mortgage. So I hope that helps. All right, everyone. Thank you for all the viewers, participations, questions. I'm sorry if I couldn't answer all the questions, but as I said, I'm on my iPhone. I haven't got my laptop or my PC, so it goes through a little quicker, all the comments and questions. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you have a great rest of the weekend. And if any of you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, and I'll talk to you later.